Las Vegas, summer of 1976. The showroom at the Hilton is packed, lights dimmed. Halfway through You Gave Me a Mountain, Elvis stops singing. His eyes fix on a man near the front, broad-shouldered, dress shirt pressed. A firefighter's badge catching the spotlight. Stories like this remind us why the king was more than music. Stay with me, because what happened after Elvis spotted that man would become one of the most talked about moments of his Vegas years. The brass section hit a clean, bright note that seemed to hang in the air. Elvis lowered his microphone. No announcement, no warning, just silence where a lyric should have been. Heads turned toward the stage. Conversations stopped. In the third row, a man sat with his knees together, hands folded tight over them, as if bracing against a wave. He didn't move, didn't smile, just watched Elvis with an intensity that cut through the dark. The spotlight caught something metallic pinned to his jacket pocket. A firefighter's badge, its edges glimmered gold against the navy fabric. A couple in the row behind him whispered. One of them, a regular at these Hilton shows, leaned in. That's the guy from the hotel fire last month. The smell of cigarette smoke drifted across the room, mingling with the faint tang of hairspray and stage powder. A waitress froze mid-step, balancing a tray of highballs, eyes flicking between Elvis and the man. Elvis tilted his head like he was trying to place a face from a dream. The crowd was silent now, no clinking glasses, no coughs, just the faint hiss from the guitar amps. He took a step forward, then another. His boots tapped softly on the edge of the stage. Photographers near the front crouched lower, lenses clicking in anticipation. The man didn't flinch, didn't look away. There was something about his stillness, like he was used to waiting out tense moments. Elvis stopped just shy of the stage edge, eyes never leaving the third row. Ladies and gentlemen, he let the words hang for a beat, scanning the man as if weighing his next move. The brass players exchanged confused glances. Behind them, the drummer held his sticks aloft, waiting for a cue that didn't come. A whisper of anticipation moved through the crowd like wind across tall grass. Something was about to happen. It wouldn't be until much later that people would compare stories, what they saw, what they thought Elvis was doing. But in that moment, all anyone knew was that the king had stopped mid-song, and his attention was locked on a single person. And in Las Vegas, that kind of spotlight could change everything. 3 days from now, Mark Jensen would be back at the station when a package arrived that would put this night into a whole new light. Elvis is about to reveal who the man is and why he's more than just another face in the crowd. 2 weeks before that Hilton show, the night sky over downtown Las Vegas glowed an angry orange. Sirens cut through the desert heat. Thick black smoke curled out of the upper floors of a mid-rise apartment building. Inside, firefighter Mark Jensen was moving blind. Witnesses later told reporters that the hallways were choking with smoke so thick it turned the beam from a flashlight into a dull halo. Somewhere in the chaos, a baby was crying. Mark kept low, one gloved hand skimming the wall for bearings. He'd already carried one woman down the stairwell, her arm over his shoulders, her breathing ragged, and now he was going back in. Another firefighter shouted something over the roar, but Mark disappeared deeper into the hall. Seconds stretched. Then through the haze 2 shapes emerged, a mother clutching a child, Mark's arm hooked firmly around her waist. Minutes later, part of the ceiling gave way, showering the corridor with sparks. Mark made it out just ahead of the collapse. At the hospital, doctors treated him for burns along both forearms where his jacket sleeves had ridden up. He brushed it off as just part of the job. The local paper didn't. The Las Vegas Review-Journal ran his photo. Blackened gear, soot smeared across his cheek, eyes steady despite the chaos behind him. That article ended up in the stack of newspapers Elvis kept in his suite. The king had a habit of reading local headlines while drinking his morning coffee. He circled Mark's picture in pen. Back at the Hilton, the present snapped into focus. Elvis was still staring at the man in the third row. The band's volume dipped under his hand signal. Horns softened to a breathy hum, guitar strings muted. Elvis pointed toward Mark. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice deep and clear. "This man saved lives this month." Gasps rippled through the room, followed by applause that started as a polite ripple and swelled into a wave. People stood. Some clapped with hands above their heads. Others just stared at the man as if seeing him for the first time. Mark shifted in his seat, uncomfortable under the attention. His wife reached over, giving his hand a quick squeeze. Elvis smiled, but it wasn't the showman's grin he gave to tourists and cameras. It was smaller, quieter, and then, without looking at the band, he said something that caught them completely off guard. "Hang on a second," the musicians froze. The drummer lowered his stick. Elvis stepped away from the mic and moved toward the stairs at the side of the stage. Security shifted nervously. This wasn't in the plan. The audience leaned forward, hundreds of bodies tilting toward the same focal point. For a moment it seemed like Elvis might just walk over, shake the man's hand and head back. But witnesses recall something in his expression, like he'd already decided the handshake wouldn't be enough. He started down the step, and in that instant, the air in the showroom seemed to tighten, as if everyone knew they were watching the start of a story they'd be telling for the rest of their lives. Elvis is now on the floor, walking toward Mark. Nobody knows exactly what he's going to do next, but the cameras are ready. The first sound was the soft thud of Elvis's boots hitting the carpeted floor. Heads turned to follow him. The Hilton's security detail fell into step, their eyes scanning for anything unusual. But the only unusual thing was Elvis himself, moving with steady purpose toward a man who looked like he'd rather be invisible. Mark Jensen rose halfway from his seat, unsure if standing was the right thing to do. His wife's hand lingered on his arm, as if to say, "Go ahead." When Elvis reached him, there was no hesitation. He took Mark's hand in both of his, tight, deliberate. The kind of grip that tells you you're not just being acknowledged, you're being honored. "Brother," Elvis said, his voice low but carrying, "I just wanted to shake the hand of a real hero." Camera flashes popped. Audience members leaned sideways, straining to catch a glimpse. Elvis didn't let go immediately. He held the handshake, studying Mark's face like he was memorizing it. Then he turned to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice rising. "Let's hear it for our firefighters keeping us safe while we sleep." The room erupted. People whistled, stomped their feet, clapped until their hands stung. Mark's ears went red under the noise. Elvis glanced back at the stage, then back to Mark, and that's when he added the line that changed the room's energy entirely. "How about you join me for a song?" For a second, Mark didn't move. His head tilted slightly, as if he thought he'd misheard. Elvis nodded toward the stage. "Come on, just one." Mark's wife looked at him with wide eyes, half pride, half disbelief. The security team exchanged wary glances, but Elvis was already stepping aside, clearing the path. The decision was made. As Mark started forward, the audience created a narrow aisle. Some reached out to pat his shoulder. Others whispered encouragements. The walk felt longer than it was, 30 feet stretched into a lifetime. The carpet was thick underfoot, muffling steps, but the sound of applause filled every inch of the room. On stage the band was waiting. The brass section's instruments rested on their laps. The drummer twirled a stick idly, grinning at the unfolding scene. Elvis turned to the crowd again. "Folks, he's been pulling people out of burning buildings. Tonight he's gonna help me set this one on fire." Laughter and cheers rippled through the showroom. As Mark stepped onto the first stair, Elvis reached down, offering a hand, not because Mark needed help, but because that's what you do when you're pulling someone into your world. Mark took it, and in that instant, the line between star and civilian blurred. Whatever happened next, everyone knew they'd just witnessed a moment Elvis hadn't rehearsed. Mark is now on stage, a scarf draped over his shoulders, and the first notes of a love song are about to play, whether he's ready or not. Mark stood under the heat of the stage lights, blinking as his eyes adjusted. From up here the showroom looked different. Faces glowing in the dark, sequins catching flashes, waitresses frozen mid-step. All watching him. Elvis reached behind him to a mic stand, unhooking a white scarf. With a quick flourish, he draped it around Mark's neck. "We'll make you look like one of the band," he said, grinning. The crowd laughed and clapped. The scarf caught the light, its fringe brushing against the fireman's chest. Elvis motioned to Glenn D. Hardin at the piano. A gentle intro began, the first few notes of Can't Help Falling in Love. The room exhaled in recognition. Mark's eyes widened. I can't sing, he murmured toward Elvis. Elvis leaned closer, just enough so the mic barely caught it. Don't worry, I'll carry you. The verse began. Elvis sang the opening line, his voice warm and steady. Then he tilted the mic toward Mark. Mark hesitated, glanced at the crowd, then sang quiet, shaky but audible. The audience roared their approval, clapping in rhythm. Elvis leaned back in, their voices blending for a stanza. Then he stepped away for a bar, letting Mark's voice, still tentative, ride over the band. It wasn't perfect, he stumbled over a lyric, but that only made the crowd love him more. From the brass section, someone called out, "Go fireman," and the room erupted again. Elvis laughed mid-line, then caught himself and finished the verse. He tapped the mic stand with one hand in time with the piano. Mark's wife stood now, smiling through tears, mouthing the words along with him. In the second chorus, Elvis took the harmony above Mark's melody, lifting the sound into something unexpectedly beautiful. The difference in their voices, the trained polish and the raw sincerity, gave the song a weight it had never carried before. Cameras along the stage edge clicked in rapid bursts. You could almost hear the shutter mechanics over the band. Elvis stepped forward and Mark followed, the two of them walking toward the edge of the stage as they sang the final line together. The band hit the last chord, holding it as Elvis turned to Mark and gave a slight bow. Mark shook his head, smiling in disbelief. The applause was deafening now, people on their feet, hands above their heads, cheering like it was the last show they'd ever seen. Elvis reached out, gripping Mark's shoulder. You did good, brother. Mark laughed, but the sound was lost under the crowd's roar. As the noise began to fade, Elvis moved to his mic. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, sometimes the real stars are the ones we've never heard sing a note until tonight. The audience responded with another swell of cheers. Mark stepped back toward the band, expecting to hand the moment back to Elvis. But the king wasn't done. He turned to Charlie Hodge, whispered something, then looked at the guitar resting on its stand. Something was about to happen, something even the band didn't see coming. Elvis reaches for his own sunburst Gibson, and the room goes silent. The last notes of Can't Help Falling in Love still hung in the air when Elvis set his mic back in its stand. He turned to Charlie Hodge, nodded toward the sunburst Gibson, leaning on its rack. Charlie raised an eyebrow. This wasn't in the set list, but handed it over without a word. Elvis took the guitar in both hands, the lacquered body gleaming under the spotlights. Fans in the first rows recognized it instantly. It was the same Gibson he'd played through half the show. He walked toward Mark, who stood a step behind him, still catching his breath from the duet. This is your night, Elvis said, voice carrying easily over the room. Mark's hands went up in protest. I can't take that, but Elvis didn't give him the chance to finish. He placed the guitar into Mark's arms, pressing it there like he was passing on something more than wooden strings. For all you've done, Elvis said, and for what you'll keep doing. For a moment, the room was perfectly still. Then almost in unison, the crowd gasped. Mark stared at the instrument, unsure whether to grip it tight or give it back. The white scarf still hung around his neck, the fringe brushing the polished guitar top. Someone in the balcony shouted, "Play it," and laughter rolled through the room. The band picked up a slow bluesy vamp, soft, warm, filling the background like a heartbeat. Elvis draped an arm over Mark's shoulders, steering him toward the stairs at stage right. Come on, let's get you back to your seat. As they walked down into the crowd, people reached out to touch Mark's arm, his shoulder, even the guitar's headstock. A woman near the aisle wiped tears from her cheeks. A man in a vintage army jacket gave Mark a small salute as he passed. When they reached the third row, Mark's wife stood and hugged him, the guitar awkward between them. She kissed his cheek, her eyes glistening. Elvis stepped back onto the stage, turned to face the audience again. Heroes don't ask for applause, he said, voice dropping just enough to pull everyone in. But tonight you're gonna get it anyway. The room rose as one standing ovation, cheers loud enough to rattle the glassware at the back bar. The wave of applause rolled forward, crashing at the stage edge and spilling back into the dark. Elvis gave a single nod, the corner of his mouth lifting in that half smile he saved for moments that mattered. The band launched into the next number, but for many in the room, the night had already peaked. They'd just seen the king give away his guitar to a man who had risked his life for strangers. No one knew that a week later, another gift would arrive, one that meant even more than the guitar. 7 days after that Hilton show, the firehouse phone rang for Mark Jensen. "Package for you," the desk sergeant said. Mark walked into the lobby to find a plain brown box on the counter. No return address, just his name written in a neat hand. He opened it slowly, the cardboard edges soft from handling. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a single ticket, front row center, for Elvis Presley's next Vegas run. Underneath, folded once, was a small envelope. Inside, a note on heavy cream stationery read, "You'll always have a seat in the front row." EP. Mark sat down hard on the bench by the wall. The guitar was already an impossible gift. But this was different. This wasn't a token from the stage. This was an invitation, a promise. When he got home that night, his wife pinned the note to the kitchen corkboard. It stayed there until the paper began to yellow. Years passed. Mark retired from the fire service with commendations and scars in equal measure. The Gibson stayed in its case most of the time, but it came out on special days, anniversaries, retirements, the occasional charity auction display. One summer his daughter brought the guitar to a local Elvis tribute show. Backstage she told the story to the young singer in the white jumpsuit, who listened wide-eyed. By the end of the night, the audience had heard it too. How a man went to see a concert, and walked out with not just a guitar, but a memory so pure it still brought tears decades later. Some say Elvis noticed hundreds of people in his audiences over the years, stopping shows for soldiers, children, and fans in need. But those who were in the Hilton showroom that summer night will tell you, none of those moments carried the same quiet weight as when he stepped down to thank a firefighter. The photo of their handshake, Mark in his pressed dress shirt, Elvis in white, spotlights painting halos around them, still hangs in the lobby of the station where Mark served. It's the first thing new recruits see when they walk in, and maybe the last thing they think about before their first call. Sometimes the greatest stage in the world is just a few feet of carpet between two people who respect each other. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes small acts of kindness can echo for decades. What's the most meaningful thank you you've ever received?